Welcome to Mindset Mastery Moments, the podcast dedicated to helping you unlock your full potential through the power of mindset. Join Dr. Alisa White, a transformative creator and multi-award-winning trailblazer, as she guides you on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. With a background in corporate leadership and workforce development, Dr. Alisa has dedicated her career to inspiring individuals to achieve their goals and dreams. Known as the #1 mindset disruptor, she firmly believes that the key to success lies within the mind. Dr. White has witnessed the incredible impact a shift in mindset can have on one's life, career, and relationships. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just beginning your journey of self-discovery, you'll find valuable lessons, inspiring stories, and practical tools to elevate your life. In each episode, Dr. Alisa engages with thought leaders, coaches, and changemakers from around the globe, exploring their journeys and the mindsets that have propelled them to success. Get ready to reframe your perspective, embrace challenges, and cultivate the mindset necessary to achieve your dreams. Now let's dive into today's episode and discover how to master your mindset for a brighter, more fulfilling future.
Hello, disruptors, and welcome back to Mindset Mastery Moments, where we explore transformative ideas to help you unlock your true potential. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Alisa White, and today I have co-hosting with me the lovely Miss Nicole Jansen, who is a transformational leadership coach and a business advisor with over 30 years of experience working with leaders and entrepreneurs. Nicole has coached thousands of purpose-driven individuals from around the globe in various industries, including finance, real estate, wellness, media, and even the space of in space exploration. Like, really, she's the real deal. She is the host of a globally ranked leaders of transformation podcast. So if you're not subscribed, you're going to want to head over there for all things transformational leadership, which boasts nearly 500 episodes and listeners base spanning 140 countries. She's doing amazing, so I got to get the hookup so I can get a spot on her show. Nicole's mission is to empower people to discover their leadership purpose and implement sound principles for holistic success. We're diving into topics that will inspire you and take you on the leadership journey for your next level success today with Nicole. Welcome. We're so happy to have you, and I couldn't wait to have you and sit and learn from you today and let the audience over on Mindset Mastery Moments hear some from you as well.
Well, awesome, Dr. Alisa. It's so great. I love your energy. And so it's so great to be here. As I was listening to some of your other episodes, I'm like, wow, her energy is off the charts. I love it. And I know we're going to have a great conversation here today.
We will. Thank you so much for that compliment. I definitely am people just don't understand. They think this podcast is about the audience, but I'm just being honest about me. I'm getting to learn and hang out with some of the coolest people around the globe. I'm like a kid in a candy store. So that's where the excitement comes from, because I'm a big nerd. I love to learn, and I love the perspective of hearing individuals. So let's dive into your dynamic portfolio, where we sneak peek for an hour and pop back out, and then we get back in and get into back scenes of what you have going on with your podcast and your platform for more. So Nicole, let's talk a little bit about discovering leadership purpose, because that was a concept that really interested me, because I do leadership coaching myself and I work in that space, and purpose is at the core of everything I do. So you have a system for creating greater results in any area. How can listeners discover their leadership purpose and live it in their everyday life? That was so unique. And I couldn't wait to hear your words on that, because I have never heard that take before.
Well, and thank you, for that. It's interesting, first of all, about purpose. You talk about being a leadership coach and working with executives and, in major companies. It's amazing because most of them do not know what their purpose and their identity is. I had a guest on my show, and I forget who it is right now. I keep mentioning it, so I should probably go back and figure out which book it was from. Because like you,
it all gets bumbled up. Yeah,
it all just kind of flows together. But he actually had a statistic, And he said that 70% of C-suite executives do not know their identity or their purpose. Can you imagine, like, if they don't understand, if we don't understand what our purpose is and our identity and who we are, how can we possibly create an environment for others to be able to find it for themselves and or to thrive in it for themselves? Absolutely. And so it really starts there. And so the model where you're talking about a model that can create results in any area, I actually learned this from one of my mentors, Blair Singer. I always love to give credit to him. And it's results, right? So anybody, you want results in life in whatever area, results come from behaviors, actions. It's the things we do. It's how we show up. Where you come in, you talk about mindset, right? Mindset is what influences our behaviors.
Yes.
Now, what influences our mindset is our identity. We need to know who we are, right? We need to know who we are.
And why we
and
are.
I would assert that whose we are, because that comes from a faith base, right? So to understand, because that's the container. Ooh. You know, if you look at like I take this analogy of a plant, right? So you buy this plant, you go to the store and you buy this cute little plant and you have this vision of growing it into something big. Well, if you don't increase the size of its container, it will be limited in size. Yeah. And in the same way, we are limited in size because our roots determine our fruits.
Oh, come on.
So when we want to increase our capacity to be able to create results in our life, we need to first start, before we start with behaviors and all the things, all the behavior modification, that's not where we start. Actually, it's at the root system to make sure that we have the right seeds planted and we have the right space, the right capacity. And I'm sure you've experienced this where so many people are actually stifled. This is why when I said to start off with, if a leader doesn't know their identity and purpose, how can they possibly create the environment for anyone else to? So there's a lot of people that are feeling very stifled in their organization, in their job.
Because of the leadership, the quality of the leadership, and
that's right.
Knowing their purpose.
Now, it does start. It starts with us. Ultimately, we can blame a leader. We can say, "Okay, you know what? They're not allowing me to thrive." That may be true, and yet at the same time, we get a choice. We get the choice to decide. Okay, so what am I going to do? Am I going to stay here? Am I going to go somewhere else? Even if I stay here and the environment is not conducive for it, but I can still thrive. I can still thrive. Those roots will go out somewhere and somebody's going to see it and somebody's going to say, hey, I want you to come and work for me.
Right.
And that happens. You see that like where, stories where customer service people were hired and they're, the waitress or whatever. And somebody comes in who is a successful business owner and says, I don't know, your energy, your customer service is amazing.
Yes.
I want to hire you. Calvin and I, my husband and I
literally had that happen to me. Yes.
Yeah. And we're like, if I had a position, I'd hire you on the spot.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so well said. And so that concept resonates with me highly. I think about leaders when you say that. I think about, the organization has a purpose. One of the trainings I do is defining organizational purpose and then how you effectively transmit that. And that's when I decided that that's not where I start. When I work with leaders, I really want to help them as a person discover their core values through true beliefs, and then move in the space of, now let's talk about you being a leader in a ship with other people where they're going with you on this ship, right?
Yes.
Because I'm really not, like you said, we're a lot of conventional leadership training or development. We're always doing the things that comes after. Right?
Yes.
Like you said, those mindset things, those principles and all that. But it's really starting from identity. And I love that you said who you are, whose you are. And that's purpose. I say why you are. That's why you are here and how you're to facilitate that. How can we teach organizational principles and say, okay, so we're going here, and everyone's like, how? But really no one ever says why. Why are we going? And what is that built on? Because when people get that understanding, they're able to flow. But how can you teach something that you haven't experienced for yourself, really? You're just a manager. And so we have so many managers versus leaders. And so I would love for you to comment or share your take on the difference of having a purpose-grounded, purpose-driven leader versus now just a person who might be really well thought and they understand leadership principles, and then that manager. What are the difference among the three? I know that's a lot.
Yes. So first of all, let's talk about the difference between a leader and a manager.
Right.
A leader is someone that we talked about creates that space for people to thrive and to grow, and they're going somewhere. They have a vision, they're going somewhere, and they're inviting people on that journey with them, right? To fulfill a mission.
Right.
Now, in fulfilling that mission, they create a big enough, broad enough mission that it encompasses and allows the people that are coming along with them to thrive and to ideally that the best version of them can show up.
Yes.
That's a leader. A manager manages, and no disrespect, but there's a role for that. There's a purpose for that. There's processes that need to be managed. There's, systems, and all of that needs to be managed. Right. It's like a maintenance. Right. It needs to be managed and ensured that it's continuing on that track. But a leader is very different. Now, and then you mentioned about leaders who understand all the leadership skills, right? But that might be somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, because the reality is you can be a leader at any position. It's not about the role that you
title.
have.
Exactly.
It's not about the title.
It
is about being a leader. And so it starts with personal leadership. This is what we're talking about, that personal leadership of understanding ourselves. So I actually believe, being a faith-based person myself, I look at it and say, first of all, I need to know my identity, then purpose, which is, and I've said this to people. I say, look, you want to know your purpose? I'll give it to you right now. You can save yourself the trouble of trying to search for it. Here, I'm going to give it to you right now. We all have the same purpose: to love God and to love one another as ourselves.
Yes.
Boom.
And to be love and light and salt in the earth.
Yes. To do that. Now, how we do that
is what's different.
And that may be and I call that an assignment, actually, and differentiate between the two.
Right.
Because assignments will change. Sometimes when we think of a life purpose, we think about the fact that, you know what, I'm stuck here. So this is my life purpose.
I'm going to get married and I get stuck here forever to this thing. No.
Yes. And you will have assignments in your life. There was an assignment that I had when I was younger. When I was older, it started to evolve and to change into another assignment. Just like when we learn and we grow, then we graduate into the next thing, in the next chapter of our lives. And so, first of all, understanding identity comes down to understanding your personality, understanding your strengths, understanding, and that's what I call nature, right? It's like who you have been created to be.
Yeah.
Right. Then there's nurture. So we start to learn from our environment and our conditioning, from our parents and school and social media and all the things that all that, right? We learn and we start to learn our human needs. We start to learn behaviors, right? Beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about others, and beliefs about the world around us. And our beliefs will drive our behavior, right? Through our mindset will drive our behavior. So we need to understand what we're working with. That's our identity, is to say, okay, who am I? Who have I been showing up as? Is that actually who I am? So we need to reconcile that. We get to reconcile that, right? So that when I'm coming into an environment, I'm not now trying to prove myself to myself or to anyone else. I'm just allowed to show up, right? Like, so I always say that, confident people don't try to put other people down.
That's right.
Because they're confident in themselves. Now, arrogant people, it's
required for them too.
They're that actually is a mask for insecurity. And that's not a judgment. That's just an observation to say, when I see somebody that is arrogant, I realize that my heart goes out to them and I have compassion, empathy for them, because they feel the need right? To try to establish some level of security.
That's how they thrive, and that's how they secure themselves. It's a security, and it's scientific.
It's a false security.
Yeah, it is, but that's the science behind it. You're on point. There's nothing.
Yeah.
You're not judging anyone. Yeah.
No, but it's discovering. I think that's one of the scariest things, is to look at ourselves and look within. That self-awareness. Personal leadership starts with self-awareness, right?
Yes.
To understand that, you know what, this is everything that I am. This is everything that I'm not. And it's okay. Exactly. And I can learn and I can grow and I can be better. But I'm not trying to be somebody else. That's I'm not trying to compare. I'm not comparing myself to anybody else. I'm just meant to be the best version of me. And so I got to know what I'm working with. And and there was a point in my life where I actually sat down and I was like, God, what am I going to do next? What's the next thing for me? And what do I love? So what is my passion? So my strengths, right? My passion. What am I passionate about? What does my mind constantly go to? I don't need to be taught. I don't need to be forced to do it. I do it because I love it, the things that interest me. And then looking at it and saying, how can I translate that into fulfilling a need and a want in the marketplace?
Yeah.
So, then that becomes that sweet spot, right? Where I can say, okay, this is the value that I bring to the world. This is the value that I bring as an asset to a business, to a company, to a relationship. This is what I have to offer. Right. Exactly. And I think that's really, when you think about, you mentioned about the why, there's three questions that everybody really asks themselves is, who am I? Why am I here? And what do I have to offer? And when you can answer those three questions, now you're like, okay, got it. Now I can proceed from there. Now I can grow and build on that. And that capacity can expand to be able to create greater results, because your results will never exceed your capacity.
Ooh, I love that. Ooh, your results can never exceed your capacity. That is a mic drop moment. That is I need a little like fluffy mic so I can drop them, because I can't. We get so many of those mic drop moments here. So, oh my gosh, absolutely love your concept on discovering leadership purpose. You also have a principle you talk about that is the 4 meridians of holistic prosperity. What are those 4 meridians that you talk about?
Well, so I've been using the word meridian, and I know some people are like, that's a weird word. But when you think about meridians, they run through our bodies, right? Yes. And they're constantly in flow. So sometimes when you think of like pillars, they're very static, right? So we could say 4 pillars, but yet they are established, and then they stay that way. But with meridians, you're constantly working with them. So the number 1 is we've been talking about, is personal leadership. That's the number 1. Number 2 is thriving relationships. You got to have thrive. So now I know who I am. Now I've got to learn, and I get to learn how to build better relationships, because all success, all prosperity comes through people, through relationships. If I can't possibly be 100% prosperous all by my lonesome.
Exactly.
Without any interaction with other people. It's interesting. I bought a book. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I saw the blurb, and I've been kind of exploring this as I'm looking at this model.
Yeah.
I've got lots of books. You probably have tons of books.
Exactly.
You see that shelf back there.
Exactly.
It's like, I've gotten rid of some.
My Audible, a whole pile.
Yeah. When I moved from Canada to the US, I gave away almost all my books. I kept a few, and now I just keep getting rid of. Like, I just keep releasing them.
Readers and readers are leaders. So
that's absolutely true. So when you look at trees, because some people say, well, I could build, I could grow a tree all by itself. What's interesting, I didn't know this about trees, is that there is a communication system underneath the in the root system, and there's actually nutrients being transferred between plants. They're being transferred. So that's why a plant, which is in a container separate in and of itself, will only grow to a certain size, like we talked about. But also, the nutrients sometimes, like your house plant It's a little bit, it needs fertilizer. You need to add supplements
all
to
the
it.
time. Yeah.
And part of the reason why is because it's not getting it from the plant next to it, because it is in its own little box. So trees actually can communicate with each other to the extent that if it's being attacked by some bug or something like that, it can actually warn other trees of danger. Now, let's take it back to this idea of relationships. There's no such thing as a self-made success, self-made millionaire. It takes people, it takes relationships. So that's the number 2 thing, learning how to build relationships. In business, all business is about people, and you got to learn how to, to work with people. The third one is the economic prosperity, right? So we can have our personal leadership, and you may know people like that. It's like, I'm clear on who I am. I got great relationships, but if they don't have economic prosperity, they're going to struggle, especially in the world we live in. Yeah. So so that gets to translate into some economic prosperity. Now, some people say I have a nonprofit, I've got a husband or whatever, wife that supports me, and that's one thing. But there's going to be some, for most of us, right? There's going to be some level of something that's going to need to happen there. And even if you have a spouse that is providing for you, you better know something about money management, because anything happens to them. Now you have to manage. You have to manage what you get to manage what you have. The fourth one is influence. So we've got personal leadership, relationships, economic, and influence. We're all an influence. I remember saying one time to Blair.
Yeah, that's my thing.
I said, I always want to be an example. I always wanted to be an example growing up. And he said, "Oh, Nicole, you're always an example. The question is, what kind of example are you?"
Yeah.
And so we are all influencing all the time.
Yep.
And really understanding how we're influencing, everything is energy, how we're influencing the world around us, whether it is through relationship, but just even our being and how we're showing up. And, as we grow, as we create success in our lives, we are in a position like you are of being an influencer,
right,
over, for more people.
Right.
And so it's recognizing, what does it take to create prosperity in that particular area? And so you got it. So it literally starts, though, if you don't have the personal leadership piece in place, then when you get to the influence piece, you are not going to be as effective, and it's not going to be as sustainable. Because when something happens, and I've seen this many, many times with leaders, we've all seen it, right? With leaders who get to that point and who don't have the firm foundation of personal leadership and healthy relationships, that they may have financial success, but they are empty inside.
Yes.
They may be considered an influencer, and you have a podcast. A lot of people want to be on your show.
Right.
And so I've had lots of people that have reached out to me. They're like, I have 100,000 followers. I've got 1 million followers. And I'm like, congratulations. My question to you is, how are you creating transformation?
Right. That's it.
That is what this show is about. Yeah. I could go on for hours on this.
I mean, you got me all fired up because you're speaking all my language. And that's what I talk about, my triple I principle of impact, influence, income. And I say, one of the middle I is for influence. And I'm like, I'm not talking about taking selfies or having a bunch of people follow you, because I say it all the time. I just said it on campus too, that we're influencing all the time. And I love what you said is, how are you influencing and on what? So now I say, well, are you influencing, since you're already influencing, and we know that's a given, because whether you are a dump truck driver, a teacher, a nurse, a doctor, you have a podcast, whatever you do, you're influencing, but are you aware of it? And are you doing it with intention?
Exactly.
Because if you have a child, you're influencing that child. You talk about nature and nurture. We're influencing them whether we know it or not. So why not pay attention, be in awareness, and do that with intention, knowing that whether you have a social media account or whether you got 1,000 followers, even if you have one person connected to you, whatever you put influences them. So when you think about that, now you understand the responsibility that you have as you walk this earth, especially if you want to be in prosperity and have these relationships, which is where I'm going to pivot to next, because another thing you talk about a lot is resilience in relationships. And this podcast, when we talk about mindset, resilience is one of those mindsets we talk about. And people talk having a resilient mindset. And all we're thinking about, well, is getting back from something, is overcoming something. A lot of times we forget that there's resilience where there's some things that happen that you never get back the time. Like if someone went to prison, you don't get back the time. So a lot of times we talk about resilience and I say forgetting about redemption, but that's something you can talk about, you're not. But you talk about gaining confidence and resilience in the face of challenges specifically. What strategies you can give to us? First of all, let's have you define that whole system of resilience in relationships. And then you can give us those strategies for healthy relationships despite our differences. And, you know, we just came out here in the USA of people having differences. So if you want to make comment to that, you're more than welcome to. If you don't. But I'm so comfortable, and I made some social media, a couple of posts over the couple of days where my comment to everything is let there be peace, maintain being light, maintain being love, maintain that together we move forward. If we don't come back together, we're not going to win. That's when we all lose, is because we don't, so let's talk about resilience in relationships from your perspective, Nicole.
Yeah. Resilience, a lot of times we think about is kind of like fighting, and it's fighting against something. It's surviving something. It's overcoming something. And certainly it can be that, but sometimes, and I can share this through my own personal experience, is sometimes the strategy is not fighting. The strategy is resting in.
Woo!
So for me,
sister.
so I got to share some context around this.
Yeah.
Is that, so I've had challenges in business.
Yeah.
I've had challenges in health.
Yeah.
I've had challenges in with the business, of course, finances and the impact on that, relationships, personal relationships. And so when I've been on shows and they're like, well, do you have anything to talk about in terms of adversity? It's like, well, what area do you want to talk about? We can we're happy to cover any of them.
Right.
The thing is, and I often said to God in my private time in the past and saying, like, why do I have to learn this all firsthand? Like, can I read this in a book? And it's like, there's certain things you just can't read in a book. You do need to experience it. And so I've had, like I said, in business and different things, but I'm going to talk about personal right now, because I think that's where it really came down to. It's almost like it went from the outside,
and it came in. It's
and
right
in.
there. Yeah.
And so I got married. Quick story. We can unpack it later, if you want. Yeah. But I got married, and I married an American. That's how I came down to the U.S.
Yeah.
Married the love of my life. And then a year into our marriage, we moved. So he came to Canada, and then we moved here, and he decided he didn't want to be married.
Oh boy.
And so, first of all, I took it very personally, and this all ties into what we talked about. I thought I was confident. I thought I knew who I am. Like, I know who I am, but it's until the person closest to you says, you're not enough. You're not this, you're not that. That's when you really know how you feel about yourself. And for me, I was actually surprised at how much that crushed me, how much that really, I questioned myself. I realized, and it became such a gift actually for me, because I got to look inwards and say, like, what is up with that? Mm-hmm. All of my worth, all of my value is just like crumbling
away. Oh my
perceiving
gosh,
that it's crumbling.
Story. Yeah.
And so I spent the next couple of years trying to be the right, be a wife that he needed, and the helpmate and so forth, and work on myself and all the things. And he still left. Yeah. And I remember, just a little side note, I actually asked, I remember praying, and I said, God, like, what do I do in this situation? And he actually said, love your husband. And I said, this is in a meditate. I was 7 hours at the beach just going, I need to hear something. Like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
He's going, finding love in all the wrong places. And I don't know what to do about this. This is like totally jamming up against I was a crisis of faith and all the things. And he said, love your husband. I'm like, love my husband. Okay. So what does that look like? And over the next 18 months, he ended up moving out, wouldn't speak to me. And I keep trying to like give him love, right? Send him love. He's not going to talk to me. So I'm literally praying and I'm just putting out there and, in the universe, right?
Yeah.
And it was about 18 months in that I realized that this had nothing to do with him and what he was going to do, whether he was going to come back or not. This had to do with me and my ability to love.
Yeah.
Even in like perfect love, like unconditional love. Could I love him regardless of what he was doing? I'll tell you why. Come back to resilience in a moment. But could I love him simply because he's a human being, right? And love him and bless him? Because all of a sudden I realized that as I was praying for him and sending him love,
there were times
I got to the point where I was like, I don't care if he ever comes back. I just wish the best for him.
If a tree falls on him.
Yeah, I just wish the best for him.
Okay, good.
And even the fact that like, if it's not me that is to walk alongside him and share life with him, that he finds someone that will. And so long story short, he came back. Then the year after that, we ended up, and there was a whole story because he actually said to me, I hope you can forgive me at one point, and we were getting the divorce started. And he said, I hope you forgive me. Anyway, so he ended up coming back. And then the next year we finalized the divorce. We were divorced for 3 years. Right. And I'll tell you just to finish that story, people are like, what happened to the rest of the story?
I'm like, give me
what happened? Yeah. So I had developed resilience, and I'm coming back to that, confidence in who I am, knowing that my worth and my value didn't come from what another person said or did or didn't say or didn't do. And that's where ultimate resilience and confidence comes from. And so, and in the process of that, so that was 2018, my father had just died, my mother had just died, and then 2 months later, our divorce. And it was just like, there's a lot that happened in that process. And I remember I was like, I need a minute. Like I have a lot of powerhouse friends, and people in the podcasting space that are like, resilience masters and all this stuff. So I had somebody say to me, Nicole, you'll power through this. You got this. And I said, yeah, I might need a minute.
Come on.
I might need a minute. I need to, like, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, when I am weak, he is strong. So I had to go get away. I canceled. I had like 25 podcasts booked for that month. I canceled all of it. I canceled all my meetings. And I was like, I need a minute.
I got to step back. Yeah.
And that's where it was interesting, because I felt like I was saying to me, come away with me and just rest.
Just rest. There is so much strength in resting. And Dr. Ellis, my great friend, he has a whole video he put out that we always talk about. There's a time when you just have to rest. And for us, who we have a strong sense of faith, not religion, relationship with God, it's resting in him. And if you don't know how to do that, this whole word resilience has a whole nother meaning. We're not judging your way of being in resilience, because what I found, that's not resilience. A lot of times when you need to rest and you're not, it's resistance.
Yes.
And that will cost you down the road. We have a thing that we say.
It'll create burnout.
If you don't know how to flow like water, that water, you will drown before that tide ever changes.
Yes. That's so good.
And so resting in God's love and his care and being still and know that I am God.
Yes.
is resilience. And that is the most powerful form of resilience.
Yes.
Like you trying to figure it out and show the world that, this is nothing.
I got this.
I got this. I'm a strong girl. No. And when it comes to leadership, and I'll let you finish, when it comes to leadership, that level of vulnerability to say to your podcasting team and your guest, hey, I am first and I have to be well and I need to step away and I'll come back maybe because sometimes we don't know, right? We don't tell them or I'll come back. But for right now, this is on hold. And, accountability is you saying, my strength is now going to be perfected.
Amen.
My strength, I'm going to perfect my strength so I can be resilient.
And that takes courage.
Oh,
that takes so much courage to do it. It's easy to stay in the game. It's easy to just, even though it's like you get tired, okay, you experience a law of diminishing returns. But when you're in motion in a certain way, it's hard to stop because people are afraid of, fear of missing out, fear of missing that opportunity, losing people,
someone.
Yes, all of that. And to take courage to say no, and resilience, that ability to sustain yourself, like we're talking about overcoming, but even just like that sustaining power. Mm-hmm. This is a marathon. This isn't a sprint. And I think a lot of people have gotten into entrepreneurship. I started when I was a kid into that entrepreneurial space. There's a lot of people that are coming into this space that are treating it like a sprint, like somehow grinding it out. Look, okay, I did that when I was in my 20s until my body said, we're not going on this anymore, man. We're not doing this anymore.
Mine does. 8 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing 120 hours a week. I looked back and I started calculating. I'm like, wow, I guess I didn't even notice it at the time. I loved what I did. It was good. I thought I was invincible. Every 20-plus-year-old thinks that they're invincible.
Yes.
Until you find out that you're not. And your body says, let me tell you, how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And so
you end up in a hospital at 34 and they're trying to tell you having a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because you didn't listen.
Exactly. So there's reality. And I think there's a lot of, you'll appreciate this being a mindset coach. I had a client once and I was teaching her about like little voice and that belief that we, the beliefs that we have about ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. Yeah. And she came to me and she was telling me, okay, well, this is what I'm doing and so forth. And I said, let me be clear. This is about reconditioning your little voice, not outrunning it. Because a lot of people are like, la, 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 la. I'm not, okay, I'm just going to be like talking so loud. I can't hear you. And it's like, that will only get you so, surprise. And this is what happens, right? A lot of people, I live in California. Mm-hmm. And when the pandemic hit, you saw, and I say this is like, everybody's like peace, love, and yoga around here, right? Until the pandemic hits and somebody, I don't know what happened with that whole toilet paper run, what started that, but all of a sudden people are climbing over each other. I'm like, what happened to peace, love, and yoga? Like, forget that.
Yoga pants and they're fighting people in the yoga.
Like, was it that long since your last class? I mean, what the heck, right? And what happened? Mm-hmm. It's true though. It's funny and it's sad though too, right? Because people gain their security and their identity from their life and the way it is. External. And all of a sudden if your identity comes from anything external, you're going to be disappointed.
And how do you know this? How do you know when it's because everything shakes the minute something shakes out here.
Absolutely. And having been in that position where I have literally in my life, I would say that I have lost everything. I've been at a point where I've lost, and it's only been me. And I'm literally sitting there and I'm going, what just happened?
Yeah. And what did I do?
And what did I do to, yes. Oh yeah. That was a whole conversation. I'm like, what did I do to deserve this?
I'm way better than this punishment.
And I remember, given that you're a woman of faith, you appreciate this. I remember having said to God that I wanted to have this relationship. I wanted to be like close to God. I didn't want to have anything between us. Right. And when I said to him, God, why why is this all happening to me? And he said, I will have no other gods before me. Woo. And I'm like, whew, not work, not a spouse, not parents, not finances, child for children. Hello. Don't have any of those.
I don't either.
All of that.
Yes.
All of that.
All of it ripped. And you just see it going. I'm like, what?
And you are left with, it's just me. It's just me. It's me and God. And okay, what are we doing? And so when the pandemic hit, and my heart grieved for those that were afraid, those that lost jobs, those that lost loved ones.
Yes.
So I don't want to say that I'm not diminishing that.
Yeah.
But at that point, that's where my resilience, in a way, I was kind of like, oh, it's just like a, because I had already been through so much.
Thank you.
Developed the resilience that I'm like, oh,
I prospered in the pandemic. I really did.
So did I. I mean,
it gave me more time to do what I love.
Absolutely. I was like, great. I don't have to go and say no to all those networking meetings that I don't want to go to. I don't have to offend anybody by saying I don't want to go. No, but
they already know I'm not going.
Yeah. It's like, we're not doing it. Perfect. So, it's in those moments that you really get to know who you are, what your identity is in. And you know what? Some of us, so I had lots of time in that pandemic to think about this, right? This identity, purpose, and assignment. And identity, if we think about it, people have their identity in acquisitions, in accomplishments, in awards and all the things that they've got, associations.
Yes.
Even some have identity, and I had to call myself on that, is identity out of adversity. I got my identity in my adversity. How many times have we heard somebody say, if you knew what I have been through, let me tell you, right? You don't understand what I've been through.
I don't even bring that up unless God tells me I need to, like we are now. Like our story right now is for someone else. And we're instructed to, that's part of why you show up. And I'm sure we don't script this. So this is what but otherwise to that, people would never know.
No. And you know what? It's only, we only tell a story. Ultimately, we already know our story.
Well, yeah.
When you're only telling your story so that you can help somebody else. I always say to speakers, as I'm training people to speak on stages, and it's all part of, business coaching and all the things.
So they can connect with you and what you're teaching. It's a connection.
But when they're getting on stages, I always say, look, or in marketing, you never tell a story unless it's got a point that is going to help the audience, that they can relate to you, that they can connect with you. And so, coming back to this story, though, I got to tell you the end of the story.
So that's
2018.
We're glued in about how that ended.
So 3 years, I was, the second time around. So the first time around, I told you my process, and I got to that point of really saying, like, well, wait a second. Okay, so what do I need to do? And so I really healed my own heart, started to really love myself and understand what it means to have self-love. And then I got to love him, and I got to see and saying, you know what? I get why he could do these things. It's because he doesn't love himself. He didn't accept himself, so he's trying to find love somewhere,
outside himself,
and so outside himself, and he's never going to find that.
Find it in you. She's not giving me what I need, so I got to go somewhere else. That's the pattern,
or just that void of, even like in his case, every time he would get restless with his job or whatever. It wasn't even maybe me, but he would get restless just in his life.
Right.
It was always like something else had to hit. It's like it's insatiable, right?
Yes.
You can't fill that void with it'll never get filled.
It'll never get filled inside of you.
Second time around, when everything happened with him, it kind of went old patterns again, and I'm like, what are we doing here? I said to him, I said, I love you, and I believe in you. And this doesn't work for me. So either A, we're going to get some help, and either that, or we're not, right? Like, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
One of the things that was really distinct, the difference between the first and the second time, was the fact that I knew who I was.
Yeah.
And so I knew who my value was. So it didn't shake me. And I thought, wow, I've grown so much. It didn't shake me.
Right.
Right. So we get divorced. I go away and all that. I come back to California. 3 years later, he reaches out to me and he says, I'm coming back to San Diego. And I went, good, enjoy. Like, we're
What
done.
does it have to do with me?
We're done.
Yeah.
And he kept reaching out and he kept reaching out and he said, I want to apologize. I want to complete, and just kind of clear up things. And I'm like, we're good. Because I was like, I'm so good right now.
Yeah.
And then I was like, God, what is this? He keeps reaching out. It's been months. Right. And so I ended up talking to him and we ended up going out for dinner. But you see, something was different, right? Because I was whole.
Right.
I was whole.
Right.
And the interesting thing is now he was whole because he had spent 3 years trying to figure out himself and find love. And he goes, I realized I was looking for love in all these places, but the love was inside me. And I'm like, hallelujah. But you know what? If I hadn't gone through that process, we talk about being an example, talking about influencing people. We're always influencing.
Especially the ones in our proximity.
Absolutely believe that if I had not done that, it would never have happened for him to come back. It would not have opened up for him. Now, when he came back and he's like, hey, well, now we're getting along and everything. And he says, hey, you want to try this again? And I was like, now we're divorced. Okay, so here's the deal. This is what I'm looking for. And this is not a list of perfection. This isn't a list of blue eyes and brown hair. Whatever. These are the non-negotiables. I'm looking for somebody. The next time I get in a relationship, this is what I'm looking for. And I'm not saying that you need to be this or that you need to change into this, but this is what I'm looking for.
Right.
And I could say that just with peace and saying, I don't want you to change.
That's it. I want no one to change.
I don't want you to change.
Not for me. Because you're going to end up having to default on your default button.
Exactly. And so he ended up getting more curious as a result. Like, we create space for people. That's leadership. We create space for that. So he kept reaching, leaning in and so forth. He ends up coming to church with me. He totally did a complete 180 by his choice on his own. He decided to do this 180 and all of a sudden it was like things started to shift in him. So anyway, long story short, 2022, we got remarried. We've been married for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
It has been amazing. And all of that, again, you talk about resilience. Can you see it through to the other side?
Yeah.
But it starts, again, it comes back to that whole personal leadership, right? It's like, I got to know who I am. Now, I love him. I am happy that we're married. Yes. There's been a few times where I've been triggered because, old stuff. And you're like, where'd that come from? Okay, we're going to deal with that. Right. Yeah. So it's a process. I told him, I said, fair warned, it's a process. Okay.
And you know what's funny? I could say, if I may pinpoint, Nicole, it would have been a process with someone new as well.
Either way, because you don't know, right? You're like little splinters that you didn't know were there.
That's exactly how I describe it. It's there. And you don't know it's there until you touch it.
Exactly.
I talk about that healing journey. Yeah.
And I've talked to so many women who are in marriages where they're maybe frustrated and so forth. And I said, look, my husband, we actually just did a podcast together for the first time last week, which was so cool. Somebody asked us to do a joint podcast. We talked about all of what we're talking about.
So that's how you're going to come back here.
There you go.
I'm going to do a series for couples on mindset, mastering your relationship, love and relationship and mindset. I'm plotting it.
So I said to this one particular I was talking to recently, and I said, look, because she was saying my husband's not and so forth, right? And I said, if I were to get my value even today, if I were to expect my value and my worth and all that, if I were to get it from my husband, and you know him, but seriously, if I would be disappointed today. I would be disappointed, not because he's a bad guy, but because that's not where my worth should be coming from.
Come on now.
And sometimes people just don't know, right? Like,
oh my goodness.
They just, we go through, it's like, well, I have these expectations. I mean, how many times, like in the first time around, realized I had so many expectations that I didn't even realize I had, that he could feel, like we all do, right? We get in relationships like, well, you're supposed to do this because that's what I saw growing up, or I saw this in somebody else's relationship. And it's like, what if there was no expectation? What if there was no you complete me? One of the worst.
It was so cute when it
was so cute in the movie.
It was so cute, and I believed it. And then somewhere in between in my early 20s, I was like, that's twisted.
Well, what if this person leaves me? What if this person
pass away?
What if they pass away? Yeah, exactly. What
then I'm completely half dead.
Exactly. So what you want is you have two whole and complete people, right? Two whole and complete people to come together in a relationship that don't need something necessarily from each other. Then you can have fun together, right?
That's right.
We are both very clear that he doesn't make me happy and I don't make him happy.
Right. But I say I help to facilitate your joy.
Yes. Yes.
Because you see, happiness.
We can have joy together.
A state of being, but we can create joyful moments and experiences.
Yes.
I also talk about how in a marriage or relationship, we're serving each other.
Yes.
If I show up to serve you and you show up to serve me, then what do we have to worry about who's bringing to the table? If we are in a purpose-grounded union, then my purpose and your purpose is now a bigger purpose. It's not separate, it's a whole. So I don't have to worry about competing with my partner and him competing with me. We're going to go out. Let's say I'm this speaker coach and he is a surgeon. He's fulfilling purpose, but I get to come home and spend my time. I get to go on vacations with him. I get to stop by his job and see how he's doing. I get to hear how his day, how he's enriching his practice, and how his staff, how he's empowering other up and coming doctors, and encourage him when he feels discouraged, and lift him up and remind him, oh, come on. I don't.
Yeah. Well, in order to do that, though, we need to live from a place of being filled up. And here's another thought, is that I think a lot of us are trying to get to the point of, when I say filled up, we're trying to get to the point of like this cup, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like getting to the place of here. Right. I actually don't believe that this is, I don't even believe that this is where God is calling us to live from. He's calling us to live from a place of overflow. If you're filled up,
I think you're dead. You're comfortable.
Yeah. But even so, if you think about it, right? So like if I'm constantly going from here to there, I'm up and down, I'm really just filling up my cup, cup.
You're not filling.
But you're not, I don't have the overflow. Right. So rather than just being filling ourselves up, what if we were to live from a place of overflow? That's resilience. To be able to say, I have plenty to give, so you can serve someone else. And here's the interesting thing is when you are generous, right? When you love someone else, you actually don't deplete your own love. It's only when it is conditional love,
right,
that you get depleted. Perfect love you don't get depleted from. No. It's the conditional love is, if you do this, then I feel loved, or if I do this, then I expect you to do this. And so it's like Tony Robbins talks about horse trading, right? You're trading off. That sounds
like the
love.
Pillars, not a meridian when it needs to be meridians.
Yeah, exactly. So when you love, when you're loving someone else freely, and love is free, just like God gave us free will, because if he didn't give us free will, it wouldn't be love. It would be control.
Exactly.
It would be control. And so many people are in relationship and marriage, work relationships, all of that, it applies, is that they're trying to control people. So fundamentally, I'm not here to control anybody, even if those that work for me. I was working with, there's a client of mine who is in financial services, and they had their team, and they were questioning whether or not, this person was committed, and this person, what's wrong with them, and so forth. And they're very entrepreneurial, and his, which we were working on, because he would change directions like by the day. I'm like, this is not the idea of the month, the idea of the day club. Like, that's not going to work, right? So
Yes.
a little bit new to entrepreneurship, and in that he left a bank to start this. And so, but he had this person who was trying so hard to do the right thing, but he's an analyst. Methodical in the way he thinks through things, right? And so he was like pushing him harder and harder and harder, trying to control him. And then it wasn't working. And so then he would get stressed. Like he tried to do it faster, and he would get stressed, and then he's making more and more mistakes. And so then he's like, well, is he committed? Is he competent? He ends up firing him. I said, let's talk about it. And he ended up firing him in the meantime. And I did an exit interview. I said, let me at least do an exit interview with him. And because it was very reactionary. And so I sat with him, and I said, first of all, I want to tell you, very important, there's nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. This is simply a mismatch
Wow.
of personality and environments.
Yeah.
Because he said, he goes, well, I was thinking maybe I'm not cut out for this. I should go to another industry or try something else. And I went, no. I think you would be better off. You would be better off finding a job in banking, let's say, a little bit more methodical, a little bit more procedure driven, the slower pace, high quality and standard, but having a little bit more time. So we ended up doing that. And he reached out to me afterwards, and I saw on LinkedIn as well, and just being able to follow his journey. But he's doing fantastic. Wow. He's doing fantastic. But here's the thing. Where does that start, that conflict in a relationship start?
Yes.
It starts with an expectation, a false expectation or unmet expectation, and we get conflict. You earlier asked me and said, how do we resilience? Relationships. See, I didn't forget. We're bringing it back around. So how do we deal with those relationships is understanding the differences in each other. This is what's happening with this whole political scene, is that people are frustrated with others because they don't think the same way as them. And I was doing a workshop. I'm trained as a human behavior specialist. So I was doing this workshop on personality dynamics. And I remember distinctly, just all of a sudden it blurred out, and I went, oh, that's good. I was like, thank you. Where did that come from? Is that the only reason why we're frustrated with someone, because they're not doing
what we want,
what we think they should be doing. And who am I to tell them and to say what they should or shouldn't be doing?
Right.
And so what's happening is people are getting angrier and angrier with people. And then what you have is people compounding on this, is people needing to be right. Because they're not secure in themselves. And so they're like, well, I have to tell them, and I got to prove.
You don't have to tell nobody nothing.
You don't have to tell nobody nothing.
When you're secure
you can
yourself,
just
it's like, oh.
You can even have compassion on somebody who says something. Like I said, and share with my husband, there was a time, the first time around, that he said to me, he stood here and he said to me, I will never love you. I don't know why you want to be with somebody who doesn't love you. Now, today we are married, but back then, it's like I'm listening to what he's saying. And at the same time, I realize this has nothing to do with me.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with me.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, so just understanding that and recognizing, like in this season, and I'll finish it there, is that as we go into the holiday season, I don't know when this is going to come out, but there's a holiday season, and we go and whatever, we're interacting with family members, we're interacting with people that don't think the same way as we think. How about setting aside that need to be right?
Yes.
And getting curious and asking questions, being slow to speak, quick to listen, and to ask questions and get curious about their perspective. I think too often everybody's trying to talk too much.
Yes.
And they're listening too little.
Yes.
And they're listening too little. Because ultimately, we all want the same thing. We want to be loved. We want to love and be loved.
We want to live.
We want to be heard, seen, and known. We want to have a good life for ourselves, practically speaking. We're talking about politics. It's like that we want to have a good life. We want to provide a good life for ourselves and for those we care about. Now, how we get there is where we different of how to get there. But if we focus on our differences,
that will magnify.
They get magnified. What you focus on expands. So it magnifies it, and all it does. I had a guest on my show.
Blocks so much opportunity. So much opportunity.
I had a guest on my show that said, polls, Gallup polls, and all that. All it does is divide us, because all a poll does is determine how we are different. What it doesn't do is
there's no poll to see how many people are alike.
Exactly, and that's what we need to do. For us to come together.
Really care about stem cell research, floodlights, alligators, and just give us reports on that. I was like, oh wow, there's 50 million people in Phoenix, Arizona, and 40 million of them care about alligators. Wow, that's amazing. Because there won't be no drama to talk about.
That's right.
This is why you can't. So when you come into that place of self-leadership, confidence, resilience, self-awareness, self-accountability, and responsibility.
Yes.
It's a different, it's so peaceful.
Then you can hear, guys. It is so much. You can be the calm in the midst of the storm, even in the midst of the pandemic, and people telling people you should and you shouldn't, and all the things. And it's just like,
I never looked for toilet paper. I had what I had. And let me tell you, water works just as good as toilet paper. When I got to India, I learned. And listen, a bidet was the best. I don't know why we weren't fighting for bidets.
When I was thinking food might be helpful, like you might want to, if you want to stockpile something.
And let me tell you, beans are great. If you got some oil and flour and sugar and water, you got all kinds of meal. Beans are great. I mean, it's like, it was funny. And I guess I pivoted like I should, is to go around the other side, because I like to have that 360 perspective to see, well, Alisa, you were born and raised in a third world country where you didn't always have toilet paper. You guys used the daily newspaper and you wet it and you wiped your bottom. TMI, but listen, guys, there's people, this is real life, and I lived it. So I knew there was life outside toilet paper. So I realized that my fellow citizens here in the US, they don't know life without toilet paper. Someone from India knows exactly what life is without toilet paper. Someone from Dubai, same. We have to understand. So instead of sitting there and think, you guys are crazy, this is animalistic that you're fighting for toilet paper. But for them, that's a security.
Yes.
And so I had to have compassion. But with the voice of reason say, you do know you can wash your bottom with water if all goes to hell, honey. Yeah. And they're like, I never thought about that. And there we go.
Perspective. Yeah.
But if I come into Justin, that's animalistic. Oh my gosh, that's what's wrong with us in America. You could always use water. You can use paper. You can always just wipe it with a leaf. It wouldn't help anyone. They wouldn't.
Nobody's going to listen. Yeah. Nobody's going to listen to that, because you're defending, you're attacking, or you're criticizing, judging them. But that's where the compassion and the empathy is, to realize and say, like I said, my husband would never have come back.
And that's
had I not learned that lesson. And I not learned that lesson where I could actually hold the space for him to even want to come back and to feel safe to come back.
And can I say this? For someone who's listening to us, where their husband or partner or wife or business partner has not left, do you know that the feeling that they're always welcomed to explore and find and love themselves if you allow that expectation in your relationship, when someone is not even threatening or haven't authored a word or action to leave, if you create space, that's a resilient mindset.
That's right.
That will transcend to creating relationships for prosperity.
Resilient relationships. Yes.
I just heard that when you said it. I'm like, ooh, I got to say it. I got to say it. I got to say it.
Good.
Because a lot of us are thinking about the husband that left or the business partner that left. That would be the reactive. That would be the reactive. But the proactive part of resilience is becoming the person that facilitates other people. I saw a video, Nicole, where this man was saying, if you are in a relationship with someone who is like you and you guys agree on everything, that relationship is not good. Someone is not needed. And I'm like, say what?
Yeah, I used to say that if we both think the same way, then it's like
one's two walk together if they don't agree.
Yeah. But one's obsolete. If you've got everybody and everybody thinks the same way, or you've got two people and they think the same way.
Thinking the same way. I think that's he wasn't clear on. It sounded like he was saying if you don't disagree. Now we're going to have differing opinions, but for us to be in the spirit of disagreement, like I think
there's a difference. Yeah,
there's a difference, yeah. And I'm like, I want people to understand the reason your marriage worked is because you and your husband were in agreement, not about being together, but being by yourselves, with yourselves, for yourselves.
Yes. And we had some values that we had some at one point
values.
At one point,
values.
I thought, why is he's jamming up against my values? At some point, I realized though that he was also jamming up against his own. We had conversations about who we were, and we had done a lot of personal development, both of us. And so, but we had those conversations, and I'm like, what is he doing? And because when I realized that he was actually jamming up against his own core values, and that's why he was self-sabotaging, I could have compassion and go, okay, so wait a second. I'm going to deal with my stuff over here. But what's happening over here that I can serve him? You talk about serving. What can I bring to the table that can help him to create that space for him? And to your point in that gentleman that was mentioning that is, if we think the same, imagine you sit around a boardroom table and there's all these brilliant minds, but they all think the same way. You don't need all of them to sit there. Just need one, because it's going to be the same thing.
Exactly.
And so we do need the differing opinions. We do need the different perspectives. And men and women are different, for example. Just to begin with, let alone that. But even in any relationship, we're different. We're all unique. We're all created unique. We all have different personalities and strengths. And even if they have the same strengths and the same personality, you throw experiences in there, we're all unique. So we're going to bring our perspectives to the table. And as we do that, it actually enriches it. Imagine if everything was one color, or imagine if everybody thought the same. How boring!
Beautiful if we were the same color right now. Not the same color here.
I mean, it would be so boring. Yeah. Right. And we would miss. It would be so narrow. We would miss out on so much richness. Yes. And in the context of business and decision making and leadership, we would miss out on a lot of solutions and opportunities and innovation through that process. And so it's good for those diversity. When I think of diversity, I think of diversity of thought. It's not necessarily you
about
have this
race and
color. That is.
I think it's the most abused word. I think when I talk about diversity, Nicole, I talk about diversity and how we can truly maximize on it. Not like you have to stop putting all the short girls over here and all the tall boys over there, and you got to make sure you have bathrooms everywhere. I don't want to hear that stuff. Like, that's someone else's call, not mine. Let the managers deal with that. From my perspective of bringing people together to heal, grow, and make impact and influence and income, I want you to think, well, what is the diversity in thought, and behavior and contribution. And
Yes.
where are we missing capitalizing? And when I say capitalize, I'm talking about becoming aware, knowing it's there, and then properly facilitating the flow and use of the diverse
Yes.
things I just mentioned for the continued growth of this company, of this relationship, of the organization, in context of what the purpose is of our union as co-workers, as a husband and wife, as business partners. So diversity should always be, it shouldn't be a hot topic that we hire a guest speaker to come in and talk for, and we pay them $10 million, because then we have a problem. If that's all we do to scratch our little diversity box,
Yep.
make sure you have 10 orange people and 5 blue ones. Oh, that's not diversity, because you and I could be of the same mind. As you can see, we agree on so much here.
Yes.
That we would need a third party to come and sprinkle some extra flavor and bring us to another level, because we agree on so much just on this podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would
Well,
be
that's-
use of diversity.
And that's where a lot of organizations, they say we have diversity and inclusion, but they actually have a singular thought. And now they're hiring people from all these different cultures and different genders and so forth.
To
and
paint
putting
a
them at the table
picture. To paint a picture.
to paint a picture, but underneath the hood, you still got a Pinto. Like, you're still thinking the same way.
I love
and
it.
you're wondering why, because to your point, you're not actually utilizing, leveraging, capitalizing on that, that diversity. You're not giving them the freedom.
The diversity of thought. And I talk about a diversity
you're not giving
mindset.
you're not giving them the freedom to actually think freely. You're
Right.
not giving them the freedom and the safety. We just talked about safety, is creating that safe place for them to actually offer their opinion,
Their whole authentic
and their
self.
whole, all of the value.
Yes.
Who am I? Why am I here? What is my value? What do I have to offer? Bringing that to the table. The organizations that are able to do that and to create the space and the culture for that are the ones that are successful. They're the ones that come up with all the innovative ideas.
And I
They're the
love
ones
it.
that have a resilient, we're talking about resilience,
a resilient
resilient culture,
Sure. Mhm.
because people want to work there. They
Come
enjoy
on.
working there because they can, like this whole great resignation. What really happened is a whole bunch of people realized that how much they hated
They're not
being
valued.
there. They're not valued.
And that
And
their
so-
thoughts aren't valued. And it wasn't about their race or their nationality. It
No.
was there weren't value for who they are.
And you can try giving them more money, and you can try giving them a laptop they can take home and work from home. That's not going to do it.
And nobody even budged for that, because I think Netflix did something that was so unconventional. Netflix CEO said, and it went viral, had millions of views in just a couple hours. He said, hey, he told all of his heads of department or whoever, his executive, I want you to do something. If there's anyone on the team that you wouldn't hire, if they came in the door and interviewed today, you wouldn't hire them because you already worked with them, I want you to fire those people. And everybody's probably like, what? What an animal. Well, first of all, they got a great severance. But literally, he was setting that people weren't able to contribute maybe in a way that's good for them. And the company was not contributing to them in a way that's good for them because they weren't functioning. And sometimes in organizations, you can comment, Nicole, it gets that tough because you have to pivot. And growth will be that leadership where who is on the ship.
Yeah.
And again, thinking further than what people look like to paint the image of something that's diverse or inclusion. I feel like we went so gung-ho after 2020, I think it was, on this topic that we missed the point of it. And I really would like for it to become a mindset. And that's why I teach mindset, and I created Mindset Mastery Moments and Mindset Mastery 360, because I think a lot of it is really where we think. And so
Yeah.
when you talk about leadership and transformation, I love that we landed here, but you said something that I so firmly, it's that personal leadership. So do you allow diverse school of thought in your own personal life?
That's right.
Is the
Who are you
question.
surrounded with?
Mhm.
Who are you surrounded with that provides input? A lot of times we will surround ourselves with people that look like us,
Oh, and
sound like
separate
us,
egos, yeah.
think like, and think like us. And if you want to really experience diverse thought, go talk to somebody that thinks completely different than you.
Right.
And get curious rather than trying to sway them to your viewpoint.
Right.
But get curious. It's like a good attorney always litigator will argue both sides, right? Because they need to know
naturally.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's like you got to know what look at both sides.
That's
so you
right.
can see more
and sometimes
clearly.
I can't see it, so I go recruit help.
And you go get somebody
And more
else
help.
because we have our own biases and all of that.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing you were talking about that Netflix example.
Yeah.
Imagine what would happen in corporate America if that was instituted, where you could go ahead and fire somebody who was not because you didn't like them, but because they weren't contributing fully to the organization or were destructive. And if it wasn't just down, it was across up.
Come on, up, about.
There'd be honestly, a lot of people.
I always say they should start from the top.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. I always tell people, if you see a drop of water and then you see another one, it's coming from the top, honey. It didn't come from the floor.
Yeah. In other words, like when the way I put it is like the bottleneck's always at the top. You look at any bottle, it's always at the top. So when leaders will say to me, you got to come in and fix my team, I go, really? That's so interesting.
No, I want to fix you.
I think we need to talk about, tell me about you. Well, I'm a good leader. Would you be open to us doing a little test to find out? Right? Like, let's do a little, let's get some feedback on that to see what kind of leader that you think. You have a perception of your leadership and yourself. And, you may find that your team doesn't feel the same way. You might actually find that it's a compliment, or it's a combination of, there may be some feedback constructively of maybe you're showing up a certain way that you don't want to be showing up, or they might see something in you that is actually something that you even take for granted. What and they appreciate in you that you're not utilizing, because you were talking earlier as being aware, the intention, right? Yeah. Intentionality.
Yes.
It's the same thing with strengths. If you have a strength and you aren't aware of the strength, how do you develop it? Right. But if you all of a sudden you realize, wow, you know what? Like, I did the Strengths Finder. I love the Strengths Finder assessment.
I did Gallup Strengths Finder. Yeah.
And so, when I discovered my top 5 themes of talent, I already kind of knew that what they were, but to have it defined, and it was like, oh, achiever, futuristic, belief, ideation, maximizer. Those are not vocational things. Those are just, right? And that's the nice part about it. Yeah. So when I recognized that and I realized I could see how those applied in my life and how I'd been using those in my life, it gave me the opportunity to actually be more intentional, to say, you know what? Yeah, maximizer is a gifting that I have. It is a strength of mine, and it actually underpins all the rest of it, as well as the achiever. And so it's like, you know what? Yeah, I am a futuristic. I do a visionary, so I can lean into that. I can develop that skill. I can improve upon it. I can take that thing that I might be an 8 at and turn it into a 10, versus taking something that I might be a 3 at and trying really, really hard, but maybe only getting to a 6, and so I can work on those things.
Disruptors, thank you so much for being with us on this first part of a 2-part episode with myself and Miss Nicole Jansen, as we discussed personal leadership and resilience. Head over to part 2, where we discuss resilience and self-worth, personal growth. Nicole, is a seasoned coach who has helped countless individuals discover their true potential, and she brings us a wealth of experience and insight that is going to help us transform our mindsets and bring a powerful reminder that our worth is not defined by our external circumstances or others' opinions, but by our own understanding and true connection with ourselves. Let's dive into episode 2. I'll see you over there.